Tantor Audio presents Tim Gunn, The Natty Professor, a masterclass on mentoring, motivating, and making it work. By Tim Gunn with Ada Calhoun. Narrated by Tim Gunn. Introduction. My TEACH philosophy. My goal for this book is to start a national conversation about teaching. We talk all the time about the administration of education, test scores and Common Core, classroom size and teachers' unions, but what we don't talk about nearly enough is the single most important aspect of teaching, the key to determining whether knowledge is actually transmitted, the relationship between teacher and student. There's content, and then there's methodology. The content will change, but good teaching is eternal. I have been a teacher for more than half my life. Before my 10 years as a mentor on Project Runway, I was for almost 30 years a classroom educator and ultimately chair of the Parsons Fashion Design program. Despite the fact that I'm no longer in a classroom, I still consider myself first and foremost a teacher, and I try every day to become a better one. When I started teaching, I bought 3 or 4 how-to books. I hated all of them. Some books on public speaking were useful, but I threw away all my teaching books and decided to just do what felt right. I made plenty of mistakes, but I also learned a lot. In this book, as on TV, I want to share my experiences in the hopes that others may benefit. To me, this is a book of appreciation for those doing the important work of teaching. It's an I Feel Your Pain book, a cheerleading book, and a book that raises questions about what works best. My view is that good teaching is all about asking questions driven by curiosity. It's about connecting with your students, not only as students, but as fellow human beings. In order to give helpful and responsible instruction, you need context, as much information as you can elicit. If you don't know your students, how can you be sure that what you say will be meaningful for them? I will add that asking questions of my class removed the sense of obligation I felt early in my teaching career to have all the answers on the first day. I realized over time that it was a journey we were on together. It wasn't up to me to do all the work. I came to realize that a class is a collaboration, as is life. This past year, I was lucky enough to host a Project Runway spinoff on Lifetime. Under the Gun dealt with just this question of how to be a good mentor. On the show, I supervised 3 former designers, Mondo Guerra, Anya Anyong-chi, and Nick Verios, as they learned to mentor younger designers. On Under the Gun, as the designers learned how to create innovative work under pressure, the mentors learned how best to guide the designers, to support them without coddling, to root for them without being blind to their faults, and to give them advice without being overbearing, or working on their garments. I'm looking at you, Nick. The show was a fashion competition, but it also explored the question, what makes for a good teacher? I am very sympathetic to struggling teachers. When I started out as a young design teacher, I had such bad stage fright that I threw up in the parking lot before class. Once in the classroom, I needed at times to grip the eraser ledge to keep from keeling over. Luckily, over time, the panic attacks stopped. I started to gain confidence, and I came to think of teaching as a calling. To see my students grow and mature and learn became for me the most important thing in the world. When I became a department chair overseeing other teachers, I started to see more clearly how many different modes of teaching there were and to appreciate my colleagues' different styles. I also became convinced that certain methodologies were damaging, and bad teachers filled me with rage. I think we all have stories about teachers whose influence on us was less than positive. One friend of mine had a 2nd grade music teacher who made her sing solos in front of the class to cure her shyness. No surprise, it did not work, but it did rob her of the enjoyment of music for years to come. My miserable school years instilled in me a deep loathing for cruel teachers. I'm thinking of Mr. Allison. Half a century later, I still remember his name, telling me to throw an eraser across the room. He thought I was too uptight. He charged himself with the task of making me break a rule. "Throw it," he said, putting the eraser in my hand. I refused. It was humiliating. I'm sure he thought he was being very inspirational, but the reality was that he was only highlighting my anguish. And I had trouble recovering at that school. I didn't last long there, or at any school. I bounced around like a kangaroo in need of talk therapy and antidepressants. What the Mr. Allisons of the world commit is, essentially, teaching malpractice. Shouldn't there be an educational equivalent of the Hippocratic Oath? Breaching the oath would hold you accountable for your behavior as it would with an MD. Teachers who save us from ignorance should be given the glory and income of open-heart surgeons. And yet, being such an unhappy student made me that much more grateful for those teachers who treated me with kindness and respect, or who showed me that I had value. One day in elementary school, our art teacher handed out bars of soap and told us to carve anything we wanted. She probably just wanted to relax for an hour, but I took the assignment extremely seriously. Most of my classmates made ducks or other animals. I whittled the governor's palace from Colonial Williamsburg. In addition to being, as it turned out, an excellent way to attract the attention of bullies, my soap palace taught me that I cared about architecture and construction in a way no one else in my class did. As hapless as I was at so many aspects of school, I had a terrible stutter, cried all the time, and often pretended to be sick so I could stay home. I knew, looking at that flaky little building, that there might be something I could do well after all. I found every stage of my arts education liberating and life-changing. At home, there were strict rules. My mother was so particular that she would object to my putting the knife and fork on the same side of the plate. When it came to art, there were no set rules, and the answer wasn't in the back of the book. What a revolutionary concept! When I was at the Corcoran School of Art in 1974, the sculptor Anne Truitt taught me how to look at color and form in completely new ways. Color has to sing from the inside, she said. In order to do that, it has to have some transparency. And in order to give it that transparency, you can't use too much white, because that will kill it. She would talk about colors zooming into being when they were mixed. Her passion for color was contagious. I'd never before thought about the power of a color to die or to zoom. Thanks to her, colors suddenly were characters to me. Anne taught me so much about life, too. She was a genuinely good person, and I found myself wanting more than anything to be like her. You saw the seriousness and integrity in her work and in her life. The relationship between teachers and those they're teaching has almost boundless potential for transformation. My decision to seek out Anne Truitt and study under her, not toward any kind of career goal, but because I simply loved her work and admired her as a person, put me where I am today. After graduation, I became a sculptor and builder of architectural models. Even though I eventually wound up in the field of fashion, the roots of my appreciation for fashion are in architecture. Some people believe in being practical and only studying things that will prepare us for the exact job we will have, but I believe that education should broaden our horizons. Nothing we learn that we care about is ever wasted. So many people who do great things in life follow many different paths before ending up in the role that defines them, and none of that time is squandered if they're learning. The recently appointed director of the Smithsonian's Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, Caroline Bowman, for example, got her master's degree in medieval art. While there are no knights or pietas in her day-to-day work, that field trained her eye and her mind in a way that serves every aspect of her work. Another colleague of mine majored in the ancient Indian language Sanskrit and now writes for newspapers. Even though Sanskrit is no longer widely spoken, it helped my friend to understand grammar. Not to mention, knowing that language offers her direct access to some of the most beautiful poetry in history. One friend of mine had a writing teacher, Mrs. Price, who in 6th grade wrote in the margin of her Great Expectations book review that she was talented and should never stop writing. She did eventually become a writer, and now, nearly 30 years later, is still in touch with that teacher. Another friend of mine tells me that the best class he ever took was a college class in Chaucer. Even though he went into a completely different field, he can still joyously recite parts of the Canterbury Tales, although he tells me there is not nearly the clamor for this at parties that you might expect, because his teacher made his students into lifelong Chaucer fans. Loving Chaucer doesn't necessarily make him a more valuable job candidate or help him win promotions, but it does make him a happier, more actualized human being. I expect he will take lines like, "And gladly wold he learn and gladly teach," with him into his golden years. Fashion designers certainly benefit from whatever else they've studied, whether it's a musical instrument or a sport or math. Any new information can help you craft your vision as a designer. Braden McDonald of Project Runway Season 12, for example, knew intuitively how clothes would move on the body because of his years as a dancer. All designers would benefit from a physical practice. Although please don't make me join you. I've never been in a gym, and the only sport I ever liked was swimming because it's clean, quiet, and you don't sweat. Teaching is undervalued and underpaid in this country. To all the classroom teachers out there, bless you. To all the eager students and supportive schools and parents who make those teachers' lives easier and more fulfilling, bless you too. In the course of a life spent trying to become a better teacher, I've come to believe that good teaching can be determined by 5 qualities. I love acronyms, so I'm giddy that these qualities fall neatly into what I've taken to calling my TEACH philosophy. T stands for truth-telling. A key role of the teacher is to inject reality into situations. As a fashion mentor, when a designer thinks he's making an elegant ball gown, but is in fact making something that would be better in a 3-ring circus, it is my job to say what I see. It is the teacher's job to tell us the cold, hard truth, because the world certainly will. Better to face our demons when we're in school and able to work on self-improvement full-time. E stands for empathy. As teachers, we need to have compassion for our students, to look at where they're coming from, and to intuit their particular strengths and limits. Not everyone has the same toolkit, and so not everyone is going to make the same kind of work. It's only by paying close attention to whom the students are and putting yourself in their shoes that you can truly help them. Teachers who try to make every one of their students into mini-me's are not doing anyone a favor. A stands for asking. The single best teaching trick I ever learned was to turn every question back on the student. If a student asks, "Is this hemline too short?" I will say, "Do you think it's too short?" 9 times out of 10, the student will see exactly what you see. But when he comes to the realization himself, it is so much more valuable than when you force-feed it. I also find myself asking questions all day long, everywhere I go. The more curious you are about things, the more you get out of the world. C stands for cheerleading. In the Project Runway workroom, I tell designers to make it work and to go, go, go. And I point out areas in which they are strong. I celebrate their victories. Nothing feels better than the runway shows at the finale of Project Runway when I'm standing next to a designer watching a live feed of the show on a video monitor and the designer is weeping with pride. I'm often crying right there with them. H stands for hoping for the best. One of the hardest things for a teacher is to know when to keep quiet and when to let go. It is a terrible thing to hold someone back from success, or to insist on sharing credit, or to tie someone to your apron strings. We need to have faith that we have done all we can, and then we need to kick our birds out of the nest. And I know this is a book about teaching, but I have to say, being a teacher isn't just a job. It's a lifestyle, and civilians can live it too. Certainly, if you're a classroom teacher, coming up with a way to teach well is a necessity. But teaching is integral to so much of our daily lives that I found it has infinite practical applications. Dating, job interviews, parenting, friendship, You name it. We are all teachers at various points in life, of our children, our coworkers, and our friends. And I maintain that any good teacher is simultaneously a good student. We learn, ideally, every single day, from those around us, from books, from art and newspapers, and our experiences. For me, learning is the only reason to wake up in the morning. If we live life well, we are learning and teaching all the time. If you're not curious about the world around you, you might as well be dead. I believe it's time to have a national conversation about what makes for a good teacher. In this book, I will take you through my daily life as I look for opportunities to talk about how my TEACH philosophy plays out IRL, in real life, an acronym I just learned. Please come along as I draw inspiration from every corner of my life. Jury duty, fashion shows, trips on the subway, dinner parties, and of course backstage these last 13 seasons of Project Runway. I hope this exercise will remind us to put all our interactions to the TEACH test, so that by the end we all become better at teaching and learning. In other words, better at life. Throughout this book, I will also share some of the things people have told me about their favorite teachers, so that we may all learn from these excellent examples. Part 1. Truth-telling. One of the greatest gifts our teachers can give us is honesty. We need to hear what our teachers see, whether they believe we're doing a fantastic job or screwing up royally. This is the first stage of a workroom critique. Here's what I see. Perhaps I see something Kate Middleton would wear. Perhaps it looks to me like something one might wear to take out the trash. I need to let the designer know what I'm seeing, and then to give them an opportunity to tell me what they're going for. This can be awkward. It can be like turning a bright light on in a dark room. One thing we all need help with is learning how to stomach disapproval and disappointment. Teachers need to make you stronger so you can weather the heartaches to come post-classroom. This is one of several reasons why I am suspicious of those who brag about being self-taught. In my experience, self-taught designers have nervous breakdowns in high-pressure situations like Project Runway. If you haven't been ripped apart in classroom critiques, how will you be strong enough to survive in the lion cage that is the fashion world? I always say what I think. I don't mind that it gets me in trouble. In this chapter, I will explore some of the moments in my life when I realized the value of telling the truth at all costs. I want to share with you comments from Kim, a college professor in Oregon. Kim wrote, "Throughout my childhood, I was always compared to my brother in terms of smarts and found lacking. I was a classic underachiever. My 6th grade teacher, Miss Jackson, sat me down one day and said to me, 'This work is good enough. However, it is not good enough for you.' She really motivated me to think about my strengths. Now, every single day, I try to push my students just a bit above what they think they can accomplish." Thank you, Kim. Life as a new teacher. When I was a classroom teacher, the first day of class was so important to me. There is so much to be said about that first day. We're making a first impression, and so are the students. I'd like to think that I'm dispelling their preconceptions and that they are more alert and they're thinking, "Oh, this is engaging." You want them to know you care about them. In fact, if someone was absent on that first day, I often told him or her to go ahead and withdraw. The first class was about learning the basics, who they are, who I am, and my rules and expectations. One expectation I always wanted to extinguish was that just showing up to every class meant I get a B or a C. Showing up is the smallest expectation I had for any of them. Key to first impressions is, as we all know, what you wear. That goes for both teachers and students. As a teacher, I felt stronger and more in control if I looked professional. Even in my junior days of teaching, I always wore a tie. It might be a knit tie, and I might have worn jeans with it, but a tie denotes effort. I wanted to feel in command, and dressing up helped me do that. Also key for teachers looking to make a good first impression is to look around the room at the start of every class and fully engage with the students. Opening the class with, "How are you?" is a sensational idea and so simple. In any group, you don't walk in and start to talk. You shouldn't do that in a classroom either. I would ask everyone in the class to say their name and something about themselves, and then I would make notes on the roster. I found the students felt more invested if they introduced themselves rather than just saying, "Here." They had a responsibility to show up and participate and contribute to the chemistry of the class. "You're all on an even playing field," I told my students in my opening remarks. "You will distinguish yourself up or down from this point forward. Just being here, that's not enough. You have to fully embrace these assignments and do them exceptionally well. You can't be a cipher. Just because you're present doesn't mean you'll get a good grade." At the end of every class, I would wait until everyone was gone and the next class was coming in, and then I would think, "Now I can go." Maybe no one would come up to me after class for weeks on end, but I still never rushed out. Whether or not they took advantage all semester of my availability, I wanted them to know that if they did need me, I was there to hear what they had to say. Every year, a couple of students would approach me on that first day and tell me they didn't belong in this class because they had experienced the course's content before and were too advanced. I always said the same thing to them. For the next 4 weeks, we have an add drop period. If you show during that time that you are capable of higher level work, we'll advance you to the next level. Did it ever happen? Never. That said, at Parsons, you were required to attend classes. You were only permitted 2 absences, period. The classroom experience is why you're there. "I have a doctor's note," a student might say. "It doesn't matter," I would reply. "You've missed this experience. You have 4 absences. You need to withdraw or you need to take a leave of absence. You're not going to pass this class, period." I would make it clear that this class was about nurturing everyone, up to a point. I would give the students explicit instructions in writing via an extensive syllabus. There always needs to be a syllabus. Teachers who resist having one make me nervous. When I was a department chair, I hosted a syllabus workshop and still found teachers hesitant to commit their teaching philosophies to paper. They were paranoid about sharing, but we needed consistency. When I handed out my course syllabi, I would make the students sign a document saying they'd received and, most important, read it. This may sound obnoxious, but it was sadly necessary. 2/3 of the way through the semester, I would invariably hear, "You never told us that," and then I would take out the syllabus and show them that they had signed something saying otherwise. One thing I learned in the course of my teaching career was to never judge anyone on that first day. When I started out, I was smug about having the students' characters all figured out at first glance. "Oh, that one seems smart," or "This one seems not so bright." But students often, I would say usually, surprise you. As a young teacher, I misjudged so often that ultimately I stopped judging altogether. It was about reducing my level of frustration. To keep myself from ever uttering the words, "I thought you had such promise," I maintained a mantra of, "Let's wait and see." Often the really articulate, highly participatory students were all talk. To them I often heard myself saying, "You said you could do it. Now where is it?" If we'd only had one meeting, I would have left impressed. But by week 3, I would be underwhelmed. My advice to them was, stop talking so much and get to work. To those who initially struck me as weak but who turned out to be brilliant, I said, learn how to make a better first impression. Learn how to show off a little. There's no substitute for experience. I have the greatest respect for new teachers, their enthusiasm, their eagerness to have a great relationship with their students and to help them learn. At the same time, veteran teachers are great beneficiaries of trial and error. Mistakes are so valuable, providing you learn from them. One of the worst things for a teacher is to be stubborn and rigid. When I began teaching, I erred on being overly kind and generous in my assessment of the students' work. I realized by midterm that it wasn't doing them any favors. What I was really doing was lowering the bar of my expectation to where the students actually were. The trouble with that is they'll stay there. If the teacher's expectations are higher than what the students can achieve, they'll keep pushing themselves. It's like running a marathon alone. You can't gauge where you are. And so, as I became a more seasoned teacher, I resolved to keep the bar higher. This is from Karen, a food bank worker in New Jersey. My favorite teacher was Doc John Anderson, my political science teacher at Edison High School. I was taken seriously as a school athlete, but no teacher until Doc took me seriously. He paid attention to what I said in class. He showed an interest in me. He uncovered the real Karen. I began to be recognized as a smart kid, not a jock. He meant the world to me. When you are struggling to find yourself, having someone really listen is very important. I graduated with a BS in criminal justice. I was the first person in my family to get a college degree. Doc gave me the confidence to just go do it. I missed that little guy. The Under the Gun Workroom. The three competing mentors on the first season of Under the Gun, Anya, Mondo, and Nick, had radically different styles of teaching. And if you throw me into the mix, there's yet another style. On that topic, I experienced some major envy for the mentors because they had unlimited access to their designers all day, every day. On Project Runway, I most certainly do not. I have my workroom rounds, my time checks, announcements, and that's it. I'd love to be present for the model fittings, for instance, but I'm not permitted because of crew and time constraints. Anyway, envy. Anya, honestly, I initially saw as a wild card. I didn't know whether she'd be able to focus enough on the designers. Well, as students will, she surprised the hell out of me. She was the keenest listener. She was a prober. She pummeled new designers with questions. She was a truth teller about execution, and she didn't miss a trick. Also, I observed that even though she is very confident, she has a remarkable ability to check her ego at the door. For her, it was about them, and yet surprisingly, she doesn't appear to be the most popular with Project Runway viewers, at least with the ones who come up to me on the street. Strangers tell me, that Anya, she doesn't know construction, but on Under the Gun, she impressed me beyond words. What she may have lacked in sewing experience when she was a runway designer herself, she makes up for in understanding style and teaching. She did have one mentoring problem, though. She sometimes became so involved that she nitpicked. At one point, she was sitting on a stool staring back and forth between two of her designers. My head would have exploded if I'd been one of them. I told her, "What you have become is what I always feared I would become if I had free rein with the designers. A relentless, overhanging nag. Get out of the workroom." I laid down a mandate for all the mentors that they had to leave the workroom an hour before I called time. Because if they're in there when the clock is running down, all they do is bark orders like, "Hurry up, what about the collar? The sleeve isn't done." And the designers stay in a state of nonstop panic that is not constructive. Mondo was a wonderful mentor in many ways. He liked quirkiness in his designers, and he gave them room to take chances. And yet, there were times I wished I could shove Mondo out of the way and weigh in myself. He worked from two polarities. One was to give almost no critical feedback, but only the most glowing encouragement. "You can do it!" The other was to be intensely specific in telling them what he believed they should do. He needed to strike some happy medium. For the beach challenge, Mondo took palm fronds and placed them under a sheer material, and he said to Michelle Uberest, "Look, it's your own textile." Michelle took a suggestion, but the palm frond textile wasn't her own idea, and she never seemed to fully commit to it. In the end, she was sent home for that design. Why aren't you being more diligent truth tellers? I often ask the mentors. You know from your own experience when something is impossible. If you don't believe they can pull it off in the allotted time, it is your job to tell them. The issue on one garment by someone on Mondo's team was seam allowance. Mondo didn't
Sample complete. Ready to continue?